That's right. Our guest on Just Talking is Cameron Sorsby. He is the CEO of Praxis, a college alternative that builds your skills, your network, and leads to a full-time job at a growing business. So how's it going, Cameron?
Good. How's everyone doing?
We're doing fabulous here in the West Coast, and I know you're on the East Coast, and we're a little bit jelly right now. I'm thinking you have the little bit of the better weather happening other than in California with all these crazy fires.
I don't worry about the smoke at this moment, so that's good for me.
Not at all.
We can actually see our mountains for the first time in days this morning.
I know,
Nice.
right?
Yeah.
But I think the thing that you've been overswamped with, I'm sure, is a lot of the millennials contemplating, taking a gap year, being, possibly thinking about being a college dropout, because who honestly wants to be paying for tuition when it's remote learning and you feel like you're not getting that full potential that you paid into, to these universities. And for the listening audience who has no idea what Praxis is, how would you explain your platform?
Absolutely. So Praxis, it's a 1-year program to help you launch your career. And you go through a 6-month business boot camp, and then we place you in full-time jobs at growing tech startups, other growing businesses for that second half of the program. And then you join our alumni network, and we're supporting our alumni long-term as they develop in their career. So what we look for are those like young, ambitious hustlers that want to take their career development into their own hands.
I like that, because you're very much in for the whole skill based and less the degree based. And I came up with the list, right, I think, of my skills. I wanted to see if you could evaluate me on the show, because it always seems fair that the listening audience can get an idea of what Praxis is all about. So I would say my leadership skills is, I'm a leader. I like to think that. I've been in student body all my life. I was able to be president, and I became a filmmaker, and I'm a director. So I would say I have management skills. I'm really good at working OneDrive and Google Drive. I know how to work remotely. So switching over for the Chris College show, doing this during the pandemic was really easy for myself. And then, as I mentioned earlier, I'm a director and I know how to edit. So I think those are some really good skills. I know social media. I think most millennials do. But then again, some of them are still have a tricky time, running those ad spaces. And then I'd say I know how to network, because, if you're going to be in radio and you're going to be a talk show, you got to be able to network to get awesome people like Cameron Sorsby on the show.
Right.
So with these skills, how would you evaluate me, or what should I be focusing on?
Chris, I think you're a really good example. It sounds like you found your passion and interest in the media space, at least for now and everything. But even just shortly getting to know you yesterday and, going back and forth on email, 2 things stand out from like how we'd be looking at a participant. You have strong communication skills. And the second one is a bias for action. So just setting up your own show, and, all the networking, like you have to be reaching out to people. You have to be looking for those people to get them on the show. Everything I'm sure that went into going from studio to remote, more seamlessly, that tells me like, hey, this person's just going to get stuff done. And there's limitless opportunities as to what you can do with that. And that's a big thing that we look for in participants. Like, all right, are you hardworking? Do you have enough confidence at an early age just to get moving, as opposed to the default path of college? You've been told your whole life, from older, parents, teachers, influencers of an older generation, that, hey, as long as you go to college and you show up, they'll give you a good job. Don't worry about student debt. It's a worthy investment. But the types of people, whether they went to college or not, that have not just successful careers on paper, but find meaning in their professional lives, are the types of people that are going to put themselves out there and make things happen for themselves. And
okay.
I think, that's what comes to mind.
Real quickly though, too. So Chris can get Praxis and get a job because he's technologically savvy. What about Marissa? I'm an actor. I'm screwing up my swishes. Where do I fit in with Praxis? I am like horrible at technology.
Yeah. So one, Praxis is not trying to be all things to everyone. And I think that's one of the major problems with college is that the message we send to young people is that you have to go this specific path. Otherwise, you can't be successful. That's the message that people get. And anything, you know, whether it's a business or you know, like a political philosophy, religion, anything that's saying like, hey, you can't be successful, you can't do great things unless you have us, that seems very scammy to me. So
right.
With Praxis, you know, we're set up, we want to be working with young people that have a, you know, an interest in business, but they don't know what they want to do yet. And you don't have to be like, we don't teach our participants technical, like we're not developing them into software engineers or coders or anything. These are people that are like, hey, you can go into a business and go into sales or customer success, customer support, and just learn through experience, learn by doing. Like, oh, like maybe I could see myself running my own thing 5 to 10 years from now. This is the best way to learn. And you know, I think if someone's interested, I mean, without being inside the industry myself, like if someone's interested in pursuing acting, you know, it seems like you have to start acting, like you have to start doing things. And you know, if there's like an 18-year-old that's like, okay, I'm really interested in theater and acting, of course, like I know there's programs out there at, you know, specific specialized universities and things like that. But whether you're doing something like that, like ultimately you have to go do it is the biggest thing. And it's funny though, because we've had a handful of participants in the program that have those more creative interests, and they're using Praxis to like, okay, I want to get to a foundational level of my career that kind of allows me the freedom and flexibility to pursue my, you know, more passion projects and everything. So that's been cool to see too.
Not have a huge student loan debt over your head like
Exactly,
Absolutely.
exactly.
I mean, the average
You know,
student loan debt, I mean, I saw that you guys reported it actually just yesterday all over your guys' social media accounts. Student loan debt is averaging about $10,000. That's where I just sat at now, just getting out of grad school. And I would say the number one reason I pursued going to grad school right after undergrad was for the reason that, you know, one, yeah, it's like, you know, you can sit on the student loan and hope that, you know, once you complete your grad school, you know, you'll get that dream job right out of it, which is just not true. And especially since, you know, I'm the class of COVID, you know, there ain't no jobs anytime soon. And, you know, and hearing my skill sets, would you have advised me to go do grad school? Because my whole belief is, you know, while you're young, I always advocate for the youth to go to college immediately, because if you wait too long, then you're not going to be in that same workflow, you know, doing homework, being on a school load, and also having to do a job at the same time. And I can only imagine it gets a lot harder once you're in your 30s.
Yeah. So I think if I was, you know, if I was advising a recent college grad on grad school specifically, I'm not going to like push them one way or the other. Like, one, the most important thing is you need to feel like you're making the decision for yourself, and you're not making the decision out of familial or social pressure. Like, oh, I need to go do this thing. And specifically with grad school, the common situation that I come across with friends of my own and other people, you know, people we talk to through the program and outside of it, is if you have a very specific reason and it's like, okay, I'm doing grad school for this specific reason and it's going to lead to this outcome, that could very well may be a good opportunity for you to go. But if it's, hey, so many people, whether before college or after college, they don't know what they want to do. So they default to, I should go to grad school, and I'm just going to punt that decision down the road. And somehow magically having a grad degree is going to make me more valuable on the market. And that's not what happens. And then you have all this student debt on top of it. So my first piece of advice is go figure out what you want to do. And then the question becomes like, hey, what experiences, whether it's gaining work experience in a certain industry or doing a formal education program or an alternative program, like what's going to make the most sense?
Yeah, but don't you also think too, with millennials going to grad school, it kind of creates a security blanket, for the long term? Because when I was viewing grad school, it's like obviously, I went in for television, film, and theater in the production cohort. My
Yeah,
ideals are not to be a professor right away. I'm 27, man. I'm trying to
right.
launch a millennial talk show because there's no 35-year-olds or younger hosting a show like Marissa and I are doing today. But
Yeah.
then when I think about my degree, I also think, hey, wow, this is kind of a great security blanket for me to know that, when I get older, I possibly have those positions later down the road. Do you see that possibly happen, or do you see something different happening? Because I know in June, President Donald Trump, he just signed an executive order saying that all federal agencies will stop hiring based off degree based and will start going with
Right.
skill based. So I can only imagine Praxis was going, yeah, let's
Yeah.
go. We finally got some momentum going.
Yeah. So, I mean, we've been seeing that play out in the real world for last 6 7 years of Praxis. Especially we work with like a lot of tech startups. They've been known as an industry to like not want to see those MBAs come in the door that are typically like, all right, I'm going to go get my MBA and then I'm going to go work at like a large consulting firm or a corporation. That's the antithesis of the types of skills and character traits that more dynamic growing businesses want to see from younger employees coming into their company. So in many cases, in my experience, it can be a negative signal depending on what you're pursuing. Now, if someone has an interest like I want to go into academia, then of course that's what you should be doing. But as far as it translating into different professional careers, I don't, I think for the last 30 years, it's just been assumed this is an automatic positive to myself as a candidate and my professional development. And it's a no-brain return on my investment. That's just not the case. And it makes life difficult. It can make life so difficult with not just student debt, but just, okay, now I have golden handcuffs and now I have to be commanding a certain salary instead of taking a more experimental approach of like, okay, like I want to find out what I'm interested in. And in
It's
order to do that, I may be not prioritizing, income over learning experience.
So,
Yeah.
Cameron, you said that a lot of these startup companies are not really looking for the person with the MBA. Is it because they're requiring the salary, or is it because does formal MBA education make the person rigid in the way they thought? Like, because I would
Yeah,
think that they would want the MBA, but you're saying opposite. So, like, is it because of just the income?
it's both. And I think sometimes the income demands that somebody with more student debt has to bring to the table are a reflection of like, okay, how is this person going to come in and add value to my company? And it does kind of come back to like how they're trained in a more academic MBA environment. Like I don't, most of these positions at startups and stuff, I don't need someone forecasting business models. Like I have one or two people to do that. I need people that are going to get into the weeds and solve problems and be great representatives of our brand to our customers and be able to sell. Like all of those types of things that are most valuable, you don't learn inside of a classroom.
Gotcha. And, I would, as we were talking about this and student debt, obviously, Praxis, it ain't free. You got to pay into it. There is a tuition
Yeah,
fee. I believe it's $12,000 to join the program.
right.
I think,
Yep, 12,000.
about 12,000, I think it was. You could correct me.
No, it's 12,000. Then we offer really flexible payment plans, so they can be paying through the 12 months and beyond at under $500 a month, or we have tuition deferment where you don't start paying tuition until you get hired into a full-time job.
Gotcha. Yeah, because I mean, I think when when we talk about Praxis, it's like, why should millennials choose Praxis over college? Because I mean, when obviously we're talking about the student debt, I would think most students would choose to not go to college is because of the tuition. Do you find that your tuition is fair for the for students coming through to your platform?
Oh my gosh. I mean, if you're making the direct comparison between Praxis and college, one, we're getting stronger outcomes, far stronger outcomes on a much quicker timeline than the average college graduate. So our participants, they're coming out of the 12-month program averaging 50,000 in salary, and now we're 7 years old, so our 3-year, 5-year graduate data, it's showing very high income mobility. So they're going up into 70, 80K plus over that time. They're able to keep growing. Their lack of a degree is not limiting them in future potential. And you're getting, so college, the average graduation is taking 5 to 6 years now. It's not 4
easily.
years.
You're right. I say a 4-year university it's so overrated. It's a myth now. It took me 5 years to do my undergrad.
Right. Yeah. And it's, the average tuition is $26K a year. And that's not factoring in your interest rates on your student loans. And it's also not factoring in your lack of work experience for that time period. So a Praxis graduate, they're coming in, it's 6 months until they're in a full-time job. And then that same person, comparing their college version of themselves, they have 4 to 5 years of work experience and income, and their college version of themselves is starting from scratch at graduation.
I did find it fascinating though, because I mean, you did go to college, and your senior year, you interned with a man named Isaac Morehouse, who is the founder of Praxis, during your senior year of college. What did you say you wouldn't be where you're at today if it weren't for attending college and a forced internship?
Yeah, well, so that was not a forced internship.
Okay.
Halfway through my college experience, I wish, I'm in the position where it's like, I wish Praxis existed when I was 18 and could potentially consider it. But halfway through college, I was in the mindset of like, okay, I'm getting zero tangible value out of this, but I feel socially like I just have to finish and I have to do it, like that whole sunk cost fallacy. But I switched my mindset to, all right, I've decided I'm going to stay and finish this and get my piece of paper. I don't expect it to help me on the job market or anything, but I'm just going to get it. And I'm determined to create valuable experiences for myself outside of the classroom. And that's when I started networking and started, hitting people up like Isaac and started to pursue my own personal interests and try to make those connections between, hey, I think I'm interested in these things. How would that look career-wise? And so I opened up opportunities for myself, and I was very fortunate to be able to meet people like Isaac and others that were willing to take a chance on me. And when I look at Praxis, that's what we're doing, is helping in a more programmed, systematic way. We're helping people create those types of opportunities for themselves without all the costs, both financially and time, of college. And it's working. And what I want to see more of is more alternatives. And that's what's happening right now. The problem isn't, college is still a good investment because you can have these opportunities. Like, we have to think entrepreneurially about this and be like, okay, just because those things can happen in a college environment, that does not mean they can't happen better and more frequently through other ways.
Absolutely. And, I was kind of curious as we were having this conversation, especially since we referenced like 10 minutes ago how President Donald Trump did sign that executive order for more skill-based hiring. has the president or anybody from the White House reached out to Praxis about possibly bringing your movement into the nation a little bit more?
No, and
Well,
to
they're
be
missing
honest
out.
with you, like, yeah, I mean, sure, but to be honest with you, there's been a lot of state and some federal movements to get like apprenticeship programs and other things going, and part of me is like, okay, that's better than just trying to send everyone through university. But
Right.
to be honest with you, I'd rather see just private market handle it, free market. Like let's present alternatives to people, and I think getting states and the federal government involved, it's going to bog things down and make it more bureaucratic, and you're not going to be able to move as quickly. People are fully capable of finding better alternatives for themselves. And it's more like what I'd like to see is the government get out, kind of get out of the way of college and not prop them up through all the subsidies. And that's what's led to all the increases in tuition over the last 30 years.
Yeah, absolutely. And while we have a few minutes left with you, for all the listening audiences that's listening to you, Cameron, right now, and that are thinking about joining Praxis, what does it take to be accepted into the Praxis boot camp?
Yeah, so we look for intangible soft skills in our participants. We don't even request or look at your GPA. We have strong applicants that are Ivy League dropouts, and we have applicants that are like high school dropouts. What we want are, someone that has a little bit of that entrepreneurial spirit, and they're willing to think a little bit differently. They're willing to, put in the work, strong work ethic, above average communication skills. We'd love to see young people, 18, 20-year-olds that have above average work experience for their age. And because that signals to us like, okay, you're ready to work. You've been like, if you've worked at McDonald's, if you've bussed tables at a restaurant, you've done hard work, and you've also had to learn how to handle customers well. And then it really comes down to like intellectual curiosity.
See, I always thought that was sort of interesting, two things you mentioned. I always thought it was kind of weird to mention those kind of jobs on your resume, like cashier, McDonald's.
Yeah.
Like, who the hell wants to look at that? And then, two, I always laugh when you get the degree, and then you try to go for the dream job, and then all of a sudden they go, oh, we want 4 years of experience in the field. And you go,
Right.
I've been in school for 9 years,
Right.
8 years.
Right.
How do you expect me to get 4 more years? It's like, it feels like torture, Cameron. And I believe that Praxis will help, elevate it for the millennials to get out there and not feel like they have to be so locked down on the college lifestyle, and possibly think about taking that gap year and thinking about Praxis. And
absolutely.
I would just want to thank you again. We have the CEO of Praxis, Cameron Sorsby. And for anybody that wants to discover Praxis, where can they find them?
Discoverpraxis.com.
Hey, rock and roll, my friend. Thank you for joining the Chris Collins Show, Millennial Talk Show.